So ultimately, today's topic of discussion is a bit of a weird one, but one that surely is somewhat anticipated in my perspective of things. And the topic is regarding Zimbabwe mainly. Like, I'm not really focused on society building or things of that nature, though I'm focused on implementing solutions that are useful to people, right? Which is the key thing behind what most of us, or what should drive most of us within our spectrum of understanding. And I think that Zimbabwe in itself is a somewhat unique place. One reason why it's important to me is because obviously it's a place that I'm ultimately from initially, and I think that underpins quite a lot more within it than most would care to understand. It's also a country that survived, right? It's been through a lot of different things, a lot of different calamities have occurred regarding it, but overall, it has endeavored to become something of a persistent environment. Though it had a great future ahead of it, which ultimately was deterred in one shape or another, it's an environment in which I feel that that future in itself that it had for itself is now completely hindered, and they're under a multitude of sanctions, which not a lot of us actually understand what the reasoning behind a lot of those sanctions and what that actually means. So that's somewhat of a problematic uh, thing in my regard. Though we just understand that these countries or these somewhat, you know, countries ultimately just impose sanctions based on whatever attributes, whether it be strategy for war or strategy for other things, right? But again, at the same time, I think that um, you know it is done well in some regard. And so, where do we begin, right? For its survival, I think it means that it has something. It's not the richest in terms of currency and perception from other countries, but because of the fact that it's managed to survive and endure, means that it's worth something, right? Even if that's something that we cannot completely understand, comprehend, or um, bring to light, right? So ultimately, Zimbabwe is worth something ultimately, right? So where do we begin to understand the general concepts and understand that this could take about 20 years, take 15, 10 years, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, and ultimately I think where we start, we're going to look at this book here. There's two books, because obviously knowledge is left for us to make use of. This here is the Ubuntu Contribution, a blueprint for human prosperity. Now, some people might say the things in this book are somewhat extra, but for me personally, I feel that the things in this book are somewhat are truthful, and they could be utilized to bring about change. But not only change, but change for, because in a country like United Kingdom or some of the Western countries, some of Scotland or wherever else you wanna, some of the U.S. places, it's quite difficult for things to function as intended because there's a strict hierarchy, and it's molded in a way that it's difficult to implement change. Whereas in Zimbabwe, it's more so fluent in terms of the fluidity of change and possibility. But with this, you see so many different things within this book, including I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it's like banking numbers, routing banking numbers for specific countries, etc. Which ultimately outline our understanding of what these countries are, or how we should understand the majority major whole of these particular countries, right? So a lot of people do a lot of truth exposition, And unfortunately, that exposition is not really supported by mainstream media, because mainstream media has to take into consideration what's relevant at the particular moment in time, right? So that journalism, if that journalist doesn't get that role, or if a journalist, a lead journalist, doesn't really take that into consideration, then it doesn't really matter. Plus, the information is highly dispersed as well, so it's quite difficult to actually bring that, to condense it into something meaningful. But in here, there's a clear description of a future or methodologies that can be utilized to bring prosperity to these places and individuals, right? Who are well in their right to be governed, or for the intent to be governed, and they somewhat have a nomadic aspect to them, but they don't fear governance, right? But they only seek the right governance that brings about a livelihood to their being. So with this book and the workings of this individual here, we can then start to progress onwards and use that as a starting point to understand how we can bring about change, right? But not only that, right, we're going to be looking to other things to ultimately fulfill that, right? But it outlines a number of things, especially by starting off with what's wrong with the world at the moment, and why some of the social systems that exist at present, social governance systems aren't really fruitful to humanity as a whole. So that's pretty much it. There's shit ton in here, and which also helps to enlighten the people to who they are, where they've come from, and I think a lot of them are gonna have that knowledge inside their brain that they can utilize to bring about the required change and understanding. So that is Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a philosophy also geared towards around that region. It's more so towards Southern Africa, but I suppose Zimbabwe being such a close proximity has that notion. But it's the mechanism of society, ultimately the creation of society, before everything else started being the way that it is today. And this is all covered in this book. Look, I'm telling you, get this book. You can go watch some documentary or whatever, but if you can't find it, because good documentaries that are self-made by people that are willing to spread truth are difficult to find nowadays. Back in the day, there was a shit ton, right? I had tons of them, right? But today they're difficult to find, so I have to rely more on the books, right? The books and the information. So get this, and that's gonna be the first point, and then now the second point, because what we need to understand, right, the differentiator of today, is now technology. Now, how can we take this and automate it in a reasonable fashion, right? And this is what we're now looking into. So it's how to automate it, and there's a number of different methodologies one can take, but this book really covers it in depth. I haven't really read it though. It's been here though. It was two of them. Oh yeah, no. It starts off, first chapter is like the Great Disorder. It says, "How did you go bankrupt?" Bill asked. "Two ways," Mike said. "Gradually and then suddenly." Ernest Hemingway, "The Sun Also Rises," which I think is an amazing thing. For me, I'm looking at the book. The book looks fruitful. It has an amazing set of sources, which again, like I'm saying, can be utilized through technology to help improve fair, observable governance for the people, right? And the UK is already pretty much like this to a degree, right? The UK is pretty much like this to a degree, but then we come to this point of affordability, right? A lot of people want more money, but we don't actually understand, like train strikes, things of that nature. We don't understand why they want more money. Why do they want more money, right? It could be to do the things that they want to do, but And is it because of the cost of living? How can the cost of living be rising? Yeah, when I can go to the market and I can still get fruit for £1, like a nice healthy dose of fruit for £1. Might be slightly genetically modified, but it still holds the same sort of quality, right? So there's something wrong here in our society. And being for me personally, I feel like the market thrives. It thrives greatly, you know. But anyway, this is where we begin with the fully luxury communism, which is to be the add-on to the technological blueprint to enhance what's provided within this text here, right? So we see these two here. See these two books here. We merge these when we get something fruitful. Personally, I'm looking at like airline stuff for the programming thing. I was looking at airline Rixa type of stuff, probably rusty type of things, probably rust mechanisms. So yes, I'm probably gonna look into some airline. And I think that with airline you can definitely achieve something of this methodology, because airline, although people say yeah it's good for messaging systems, I personally believe that we can rephrase that as saying that airline is a great system for building event driven systems, right? Event driven systems. And I think that with that, in yeah, it can be 10, 20 years to start the process, and then hopefully, in maybe 4 years, it can be something fruitful, and hopefully, I could be there to see that change. But first, there's a lot that needs to happen ahead of time. And it's not that I'm not grateful, nor do I want to make, or it's not that I don't want to make improvements in the United Kingdom, but I can't do improvements here. You can't technically improve anything here, ultimately speaking. It's already it is near Moore's law capability. It's near the Moore's law capability in my own understanding of things. So that's my understanding, right? With these two here, we can definitely do great, meaningful stuff. But I think a lot of the things that a lot of people, probably in Zimbabwe and most other African countries, need is just a realization of who they truly are, right? Because slavery didn't end when slavery ended. Slavery just became the freedom for the people who were the lead plantationists, you know. And then what they did is they just went and then enslaved Africa, right? And that's just basically how that works out. So it's still there, and we're still working to work out the kinks to detect the sellouts, and deal with that accordingly. But for the time being, as you can see with these two books here, once they've been consumed and read, a methodology or a plan can be put in place that closely mimics them. And also looking at some of the work of Jacques Fresco, and then also looking to China for some of their advancements in solar technology, we can really do some great things, from my understanding, and then also looking at some of the 3D printing methodologies. Just having those things available to these people would be a great thing to help them to try, or to start to begin to be gracious. And I think that just because that a lot of people just judge people based on appearances or based on what they think, without actually taking the time and opportunity to actually get to know the people, know how they learn, and to know how they understand. And so yeah, so that's my belief around that. And with schooling and stuff, I think that if that can be refined, there's definitely still time. There's even like, if that's refined in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, people learn 10 years, and then they should be able to do something great. And then maybe we can see something interesting in the 30-year mark there. Is my ultimate belief regarding that. But I think ultimately this is where it starts, because at the end of the day, it's not about It's not about driving or having big houses or having jewelry or wearing designer clothes. It's about living. It's about emotions. They're not always great. We can't avert every single problem, but we can do great things, and they have amazing systems there, which I think that it just shows the prosperity and the ability of the people to grow and be something great. And that's my ultimate belief, and that's my ultimate intention with the breadth and skill set that I've been given would be to bring prosperity to those people and help out however I can in the UK. But I think that in the West, the help that I can provide, that a lot of us can provide, is fairly limited, and it will go unnoticed. Um, Whereas externally, it can actually mean something grateful and fruitful. And so we'll look to see and understand better what Mugabe said, what Mugabe done, and better understand him, and then also the new president Edward Mnangagwa, better understand him, and then from that point onwards, it's just sort of moving. I'm hoping that God gives me the power and the strength to bring this reality, and that that active component of God, watches over me from any harm, and while that passive component of God um, caters to my being, and ensures that I'm well looked after, be it emotionally, be it physically, or be it mentally, and that's ultimately um, my belief. The active part to protect me, and the passive part to heal and uplift me. It's ultimately that, and that's pretty much it. So that's my ultimate intention, and I'm praying that this goes fruitful. But truly, I believe that that I'm not alone in this, and that something possible can be made truthful. Like I said, programming languages is a bit hazy, but we'll ultimately look at that. Definitely, probably looking at like some Rust there, and I'm hoping for some Erlang, but we'll see how that goes down the line. Because obviously I know for Rust there's definitely going to be some embedded stuff there, some database stuff, some databases, couple servers might get, So yeah, that pretty much. I don't want to say too much, but I feel that's pretty much it. But then there's definitely that fruitfulness in the long run, and we'll definitely look at that. Probably some blockchain stuff as well for the voting, but it's going to be a long time before that trust and that security can be fully adhered to. And which blockchain, all that stuff is all beyond me. But I'm hopeful, and I believe in purpose, and I believe that hatred without reason has had its time on this earth. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope I sparked some idea of some or belief of intention in you, as I have in myself.